Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringandaction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher to Teacher podcast. I'm Liz Gilday, Senior Acquisitions Editor here at Corwin. This season of the podcast focuses on mentoring in action. We have such a thoughtful episode for you today on the topic of preparing mentors and novice teachers to be leaders. Our guests are Jay Correia and Suzanne Molitor. Both Jay and Suzanne were longtime classroom teachers. Jay is now the coordinator of mentoring and induction for his district in Massachusetts, and Suzanne coordinates the new teacher induction program for a large district in Canada. They bring their experience leading these programs to provide insight on the power of informal, heart-centered mentorship, as well as the importance of formal, purposeful mentoring initiatives. Carol, Jay, and Suzanne share actionable ideas to help both mentors and novice teachers become more visible as leaders, ranging from making space for teachers to highlight their wins to fostering learning conversations between colleagues. Whether you're a mentor, a school leader, or a novice teacher, I think you'll find this to be an empowering conversation about the potential of teacher leadership. I hope you'll learn as much as I did.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Pelletier Radford, and I am the host of the Teacher to Teacher podcast. And we are in season 4. Mentoring in action is our theme this season. We're looking at all ways mentoring supports our work in schools as educators. Episode 3, and it's a topic really close to my heart. It's about preparing mentors and novice teachers to be leaders. And I have 2 wonderful guests here today that are experienced in this realm. And I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves before we dive into our topic. So Suzanne and Jay are here. Suzanne, would you let our listeners know who you are and where you're calling in from?
Sure, thanks. And thank you for this opportunity. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. So I'm speaking to you today from Toronto, Canada. And I, just in terms of a little background, am currently an educational researcher, consultant, and writer. And I have had a number of experiences in my work as an educator. In particular, for the last 6 years of my role as coordinator of the new teacher induction program in this very large school district. The school district that I worked with is the second largest in Canada, and it has 217 elementary schools and 47 secondary schools. So it's quite large. So that meant that in my role as coordinator of the new teacher induction program, I was working with 1,500 approximately teachers and mentors every year. So that was a terrific learning opportunity as I facilitated and co-planned professional learning for those teachers and for those mentors.
I actually know Suzanne because I read her chapter in a book that we were both invited to participate in, which is a well-being, mentoring for the well-being of teachers, which ties into teacher leadership as well. And I know you're working on some of that. So let's hold that thought, and we're going to dive in more to that. And I loved your chapter in the book, and that's why I invited you to be a guest on this podcast. So we'll say more. The other guest for this casual conversation with Carol, I guess, is Jay Correia. And Jay, please introduce yourself. Where are you calling in from and your experience in induction?
Thanks so much, Cal. Great to hear Suzanne as well. For me, it all started back in 1991 when I came into Fall River Public School System as a substitute teacher. And I've been here, this will be year 35 coming up. And I'm blessed to be the coordinator of mentoring and induction here in Massachusetts as Fall River. And part of what I do is, much like Suzanne mentioned, we have 17 schools and many, many mentors and new teachers. And one of my goals every year is to just work directly with admin and teachers and making it as seamless as possible. But as we know, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, every teacher has different needs. But my intro was, I spent many years in the classroom. I was fortunate enough to be Teacher of the Year here on the South Coast back in 2011, and had a short career in journalism, 16 years as a sports writer, and that paired well with my teaching career. I did both for a long time, and in the latter part of my career, it's been solely this, along with coordinating summer school and other programs for our district. So I really, when I saw the invite, I was like, this is a no-brainer. This is what I do, and I thought I could finally give back a little bit more to everything Carol's done for me.
Oh, thank you, Jay. And my experience with Jay, when I met him, I was at the university preparing and supporting mentors who were hosting novice teachers in the local area in Fall River, New Bedford schools. And my very first video, Jay, if you remember, was in your classroom. Jay was teaching high school social studies at the time, what I believe. And the video, we'll put it in the notes because it's called Qualities of Effective Teachers Through Students' Eyes. And I interviewed 5 high school students who were on this in Jay's class. He left the room, and I asked these students, how can your teacher be more effective? How could beginning teachers be more engaging and effective and help you learn better? And I have to say, it's like one of my favorite videos that I ever produced. And I've produced 75 videos that are on my website. So thank you, Jay, for sharing your students. And for both of you, for transitioning from the classroom as educators. What did you teach, Suzanne, when you were in the classroom?
I was in English and ESL were my areas of focus in secondary. So like Jay, I'm in that secondary school context.
Right. So what we're thinking about in this season is mentoring. So I want to start with a personal experience of what mentoring means to you in your life and how it's influenced who you are. Suzanne, what occurs to you as a reflective moment looking back at your life and choices?
When I look back and reflect on, I guess, pivotal people and times in my teaching career, I can think of a wonderful, like Jay, I think Jay, you said earlier that you were not formally assigned a mentor when you started teaching, and that was my case too. So I sort of found myself gravitating to people that I thought I might like to work with. And in one case, I worked with a superintendent colleague who was very inspirational. She had such an inquiring mind and such great presence and ethical, I guess, an ethical stance that I really admired. And she really changed the trajectory of my educational career because she's the one who encouraged me to do graduate studies. And so, that wasn't part of my early narrative as a beginning teacher or as a, someone starting out in the profession. But years later, she had an impact on that choice. I think also some of the professors that I studied with in my degree program were very inspirational too, just in terms of helping me to be really critical and to think critically about what happens in schools and how change happens, how teacher leadership could look, might look, does look. And then I always have to come back to, although it wasn't in a formal sort of context, I have said often to new teachers and to friends that my mom was my first and early mentor. She really had time to listen to me and process with me my school experiences and my, I guess, early desire to become a teacher. And I think in my conversations with her, she inspired a habit of reflection that resonates and continues to stay with me today. So I think mentors are incredibly important, and so can be so influential in the way you become and see yourself as a teacher. So I consider myself fortunate that I had those opportunities to connect with those
and
people.
you're already reminding me how mentors are teacher leaders in the conversations that they're having, the influence. My mom helped me to become a teacher, and like you, I wanted to be a teacher at a young age. 4th grade, I think I already knew. But then when I got to high school, the path was not as easy for me. And she was just like, don't give up. And now I look back and say, if I had given up because one guidance counselor said, this isn't for you, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you today. And we do have to trust these early mentors as well. It's not just career counseling. It's the heart-centered mentors that influence who we are today in this conversation. Jay, reaction to Suzanne's story, and then I'd like you to share your story.
Yeah, no, I enjoy Suzanne's perspective of, what got her so involved in this work, right? It always fascinates me because even though our stories have different kind of paths, there's still that common denominator, right? So I heard a lot of me in those words, just said differently, which I could relate to very well.
So what's your story, Jay?
Yeah, so, when I think about this topic, it always brings me back to year one. And I think about the dynamics, how the dynamics have changed in the approach to mentoring and induction, working with novice teachers, working with all teachers, right? Because there's always room for growth for all of us. And I just remember thinking I was an unbelievable teacher year one. And when I look back, boy, how much help I could have used from an official mentor, someone that I could have leaned on, someone that I could have truly, just truly bounced anything off, and I was kind of stirred into getting trained as a mentor by the former coordinator who was retiring. And she said, I think this is a great fit for you. This was, moving on about 15 years into my career. And I actually took the grad course with you, Dr. Radford, and it was something that changed my life. I was in there with an HR coordinator, principals, teachers. We were all in there trying to learn more about how do we just find the niche, forget about the curriculum, right? Because people come out, they know their curriculum, but how do we find out truly how to help new teachers from the mindset of balance, from making sure they take a deep breath every day, and not knowing at that time that sometimes the best mentoring I could do was a 5 to 10 minute unplanned conversation to help someone right in the hallway or things of that nature. But I get into it for the simple fact of I was ready to quit my first week in the high school I was a student at because of a poor experience in the teacher's room and getting told to get up out of someone's seat, not knowing the hidden rules of that teacher's room. And I called my mother, Suzanne talked about her mom, and I said, Mom, I'm out of here. I'm going to go become a state trooper. And she told me, quote, to put my big boy boots on and get back in there and let's go. So here we are 35 years later. And, you know, I just think that we just really, really needed this program when I was a new teacher, but we didn't. And we had a lot of informal mentoring from all walks of life. Carol's training talked about a board of mentors, right? We can all point to people from different aspects of our life, from being a little kid to right now, of who's helped us, who's guided us, who's kind of told us yes and no, that might not work. But I like hearing from other people in the profession to try it and see what works for you, because what works for me in my classroom may not necessarily work for you. So great leaders are our mentors, but I also am from the position of not everybody is ready to be a mentor. You know, you really need that intense training, and you got to have that heart that you spoke about, because if your heart's not in it, don't bother.
Right, right. Thank you for bringing all that up. Suzanne, react to what you're hearing Jay say. How does that resonate with you?
Well, when Jay was recounting his story, I was thinking about, once again, the power of a mentor, and how just even a phrase or a sentence can at a time of need really can change your stance on what's happening and propel you to pursue, you know, the dream that you had to be a teacher. I used to sometimes I think mentors are everywhere, you know, like there's so much around us, and people that we can go and ask for help from if we're not officially assigned to a mentor. You know, you can get a feeling that at the photocopy machine, this colleague is somebody I could ask, or, you know, it just, as you said, it's just in time or spontaneous mentoring moments. And I also agree with a comment that you made earlier about not everyone is ready to be an impactful mentor. That professional learning really can catapult the mentoring into a much deeper experience.
Right. Thank you. That's a great segue to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is preparing mentors to be leaders, and preparing our novice teachers to be leaders as well. That we don't have to wait for a teacher anymore to have 10 years under their belt before they can even be a mentor. We're learning, if we can do the preparation with them, and yes, have some experience, that these heart-centered conversations and leadership can emerge, I believe, more quickly than I thought they could. And working with Jay in the past, I've seen Jay's work evolve over time with that more preparation for the mentors and the choice to be a mentor. Everybody doesn't want to be a mentor. So here's my take on teacher leadership, and I'm actually using my own mentoring and action book. Sometimes I look back at some things I write and go, did I write that? No. Where is this message coming from? And I remember being very clear when I wrote this: mentors are teacher leaders. So if we go through that formal prep and that acknowledgement that something is needed, and my definition for mentoring, and we have the informal and the formal and all of that, is that these mentoring conversations that we want our mentors to have as leaders will relate to classroom practice and student learning. And that I kind of have divided in my training of mentors and preparation of mentors, the informal orientation kind of conversations, which we do need, from these formal conversations that are planned, that have reflection in them, that those purposeful mentoring conversations are the ones where the mentor has to be the teacher leader. So it's not that the heart-centered conversation that I had with my mom that kept me going and teaching, and we all our three moms are in this call apparently cheering us along. that is part of leadership, because it's a place we're coming from. But I want to talk more about how we retain our teachers in schools through confidence and competence in the classroom. And the well-being does fit into that. But as I look back at what I had written, and that I will want you to react to, is I have this a sustainability tree, I call it, the tree of leadership. And the roots of the tree in any mentoring program, to me, are the teachers. It's teacher leadership, because the administration may come and go, but mostly the teachers and the mentors stay. So when we prepare our mentors in a solid way, and they are the roots of that school and that district, they can ripple and expand their knowledge base in these conversations with novice teachers and other mentors who aspire to be leaders. And I remember purposely having these 3 branches of leadership, where it was, we want to align the conversations and the leadership to the teaching standards, to best practices, to what works in classrooms. And we also want to branch where we differentiate. And Jay and I have worked on this a lot. We have career changers. We have people, student teaching, and they're 20 years old and jumping into a classroom. We have military people. We have we have to differentiate the conversations for the novice. And then that final branch of leadership, if you will, to me relates on that impact to retain the teacher. And what else do we need? Do we need the well-being? How can we shift the school culture when you have a group of mentors who are all in a common language, speaking the language of purposeful, helping students learn? It impacts the culture of a school when there are groups and networks. And it also, ultimately, why we're doing all this is to influence student learning. We want to impact student learning. That's the whole purpose of why we have mentoring programs and why we're in school. So that's kind of my take. And just a little aside about novice teachers as leaders, where we started to work more with the mentors, is having the mentors let novice teachers organize sharing best practices group, because we spend a lot of time in mentoring on what is not working and trying to help and fix it, because we're teachers. That's kind of just where we go. So what if we have groups of novice teachers who are brought together and they share, all you can share is what worked in your classroom this week. And that kind of dynamic also impacts and shifts the culture. So that's kind of my take on teacher leadership and mentoring as they interface and weave together. So Jay, how do you want to react? I'll give both of you, let's have a conversation about what you agree with, what you don't, another spin to it. What do you think?
Yeah, so to kind of look at the topic in a broad way, I've always thought that, good teaching is good teaching across every grade level, right? And we talked about something I like to bring up is at the beginning of this school year across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there were over 4,400 teacher openings across about 340 or so cities and towns. That's a crisis, right? We know there's a national teaching shortage. We know this job certainly changes daily and over the years, but I've always talked about the balance of keeping it real, but also the approach of kid gloves, right? I think it's super important, the tone we take with new teachers. They're consumed with a million things. Forget the curriculum, forget about a new job. They're consumed with correcting, planning, routines, rituals, parental conversations. The dynamics are incredible. And I think that's where this whole topic of leadership and a great mentor, someone who's going to listen in a non-judgmental way to give effective but critical feedback, is crucial. Right. And I also think that it's got to be a team approach. It can't be an us versus them. We have to work with admin and the districts in building and fostering that partnership for each new teacher. Now, to kind of put it in perspective, not every principal is going to hit a grand slam on every hire. It's just impossible to hit, a grand slam or a home run, call it what you want. But if you can hit a single or a double with the right approach, we can grow that teacher into that next level of leadership. And I think that's how we have to look at it, is that growth, and remembering, I go back to the balance mindset, that new teachers have to remember to exhale. They have to take a minute to not, when you say, what's going well, you got to get the small wins in order to grow in the profession. So I think that's where the mentor can help guide them towards that and help them realize the wins along the way, and not just kind of honing in on the classroom discipline issues and everything that goes with all of us from a classroom that we've encountered. Celebrating every win along the way.
I love that. Thanks, Jay. Suzanne, reaction to teacher leadership and mentoring and what you're hearing me say and Jay say, how does that interface with your perspective?
So, Carol, when you were mentioning about novice teachers and their, providing opportunities for them to be teacher leaders by sharing their practice, I was thinking of Lieberman and Miller, who said teacher leadership, one form of it could be going public with your work. And so this whole idea of providing a space and place for teachers to share what they're doing, it was sort of kind of in my mind when you were making that comment. And in listening to Jay, I was reminded about the incredible tensions and stresses that new teachers face. They have to learn everything, and they think everything is important. And so they're exhausted because, they're giving all of their energy and attention to so many things. And so mentors, I think, can really, focus them in on the things that are going well, because that, I think, is sustaining the well-being of the teacher. So I found it interesting when I spoke to these mentors, because I wanted to know, I thought, like you, Carol, that mentoring is teacher leadership, but I just wanted to kind of have a look at what kind of leadership is it, and how do they see themselves, if at all, as leaders. And so the mentors I spoke to said, oh, absolutely, this is a leadership role. I don't have a formal title, but I am guiding a new teacher or a couple of new teachers. And so that's a leadership role indeed. And the interesting thing was that they sensed and they communicated that it was more of an obligation and a professional responsibility. It was service and it was influence rather than a title. And I always remember one of the mentors who said, quote, leadership is not a portfolio. Like it's a gesture of professional support. And so, that's thinking a little bit more broadly about teacher leadership and beyond title.
I like that, though. I like that. But here's the thing that I think we need to pay attention to. We need to make it more visible. So it can be informal and it can be formal. Like when I had been working with Jay and other districts, we created even a lead mentor status. Like we had mentors, and then we wanted to have lead mentors who could lead the mentors to make sure they had a common language and support, because the history of this is it's one-on-one, and we are obligated. We want to give back either because we had a terrible experience or we had a wonderful experience. So when I interviewed for it's interesting that we both did the same research, Suzanne. We'll talk about that later, that I interviewed during the student teaching experience. Why do the teachers even do it? We know we're leaders, but we're not these visible leaders. It's almost like this undercurrent of teachers that we do this work. I want to make it more visible. I want the people who are hearing this podcast to see how they can contribute in their own way, informally, Informal doesn't mean invisible.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, no, great take. I was thinking about The Wizard of Oz and Wicked.
Okay.
And I'm going to go in that direction,
All
right?
right.
So not every teacher is going to follow the yellow brick road, right? In the original Wizard of Oz, they kind of would have had to, right? But in Wicked, there's a train that takes them to the Emerald City. And I didn't want to watch the movie, but I was forced, and I was glad I did. My point being there is that we build leadership from within, with understanding the external pressures that all the teachers and admins have. But good teaching is good teaching, and remembering along the way that teachers want to hear from each other. They want to know, what's working, what people are struggling with, and I like the fact that there is no portfolio, right? There's no binder that's going to have every magic potion for the new teacher. There are going to be pitfalls, and there's going to be highlights, and I think mentors need to understand that to build that next level of leadership, they have to be receptive to listen twice as much as they speak, right? Practice that active listening that we were trained on. And to Carol's point too, yes, we've built lead mentors. We developed a district action plan that, centers around that. But I just remember one of the new things I tried when I was a new teacher, and now what we're doing it constantly. I was told to keep my students in rows, not do the workshop model, not work in groups, and yet here we go, 35 years later, how far we've come in education. So I think that, again, an open-minded approach, and more importantly, I still always listen to other veteran people because, if it's worked, I always encourage the new teacher to try it. But again, there's no one secret recipe. You have to find what works for you in the classroom. And again, the mentors have to take the time to observe. The mentors have to take the time to listen. And more importantly, they have to take the time to realize that we're all humans. And I encourage mistakes, to be honest with you, because it's how you grow. We can't, if we're just talking about the highlights, shame on us, because there's days when I look at myself and I go, wow, what just happened today? Right? That was not how I expected it to turn out. So I just think being a little more understanding, having the patience, having the heart of a mentor, and understanding that there are many ways to get to being a leader. But more importantly, if you listen twice as much as you speak, you'll be in good shape in this profession.
Which isn't the normal way we think of leadership. So preparing our mentors, the topic of this is preparing mentors and novices to be leaders. So we're kind of getting to the part of the show, which is some practical things. I'm hearing listening. I'm hearing accept the pitfalls but make a conscious effort for the highlights. I think we don't do that as much in leadership roles, like prepare that space, like Ann Lieberman talked about, for people to have a safe space to share. So what are the qualities of leaders as mentors? That's what we're kind of diving into a little bit here. We're just following the yellow brick road a little bit, Jay's metaphor. Suzanne, what qualities does a novice teacher need then if we're preparing a novice to be a leader? They're leaders in their classroom, but let's talk leadership with colleagues. Like when you're coming out of your classroom, what Jay is doing as an induction leader for the adults in the school is different from a teacher being the leader of their students. So any ideas on that, Suzanne? What has showed up in your work or experience of that kind of leadership?
Yeah, I think one of and we've been touching upon this, you were talking earlier about, listening and keeping the eye out of it. And, some of those really important stances. One of the things that keeps resonating for me is that to be really effective as mentors or as in-school leaders, or to model for new teachers, teacher leadership, I think mentors need professional preparation. In the findings that I was able to uncover, mentors who were prepared, who understood about pausing, paraphrasing, inquiring, and the whole concept of having a third point, like let's talk about the lesson plan or the observation video. And so the skills that they learned to facilitate important learning conversations were contributing to new teacher growth, to their own growth, because they were having these deep conversations about instruction. And this is kind of different from that, that improvisational help a teacher get oriented to the school. It's a kind of stance whereby you can engage a colleague. You're one-to-one, you're both just teachers, but you can do it in a way that is a learning conversation, and it becomes very, very safe. There's some joint work, as Judith Warren Little talks about, that can come out of this. So, even though new teachers are in the position of being mentored, I think if we have those deep conversations and those strategies for having those conversations, new teachers are sort of inadvertently learning, this is leadership activity. This is the way I, as a leader, can talk about my own practice and share with my colleagues, or in the future, facilitate someone else's learning. So yeah, it's just comes
very important. I want to underscore the professional preparation. That's what Jay and I have been working on for years, is in preparing mentors to do the work, to know how to have that kind of a conversation, that it is more than that orientation. So I appreciate that you're bringing up some of my favorites, Judith Warren Little, and these researchers that have studied it. It is true. And how many times have we heard mentors say, I got more out of this than the novice did, because I was having to think about how I was going to say this, and it helped me be a better teacher in my own classroom. Gosh, the time went by so quickly. I want to, Jay, reacting to anything, I want to kind of, what are you doing now, Jay? Like, what's your focus? You're the induction coordinator for the district. You've seen a lot of good. What's a success, a highlight of the work that you've seen? Let's talk about a highlight and a goal that you're working towards this year with your mentors and novice teachers around leadership.
So absolutely, thank you. I was able to do a mid-year training of 15 new ELL, ESL, MLL mentors, right, due to our influx of a changing population. So we did, based on Carol's books, our district, that's the only text I'll use, is all of the mentoring in action, first year matters, teaching with light. It speaks well to what our goal is here in Fall River. But it's deeper conversations, much to what Suzanne said, and deeper learning, right? DESE's encouraging deeper learning this year as one of their main themes for students in 21st century programming. So I said, well, I mean, that's what we need from our mentors, right? The deeper understanding of what our new teachers, face daily, and building, Carol, building that next level of leadership, right? The sustainability of the program, because, as people potentially retire or, maybe change districts, we hope not, but having the new mentors be ready to step into that role. You always taught us that we've got to have the next level of leadership ready to assume, right? And I think that's one of the main highlights that I'm trying to build, is the fact that there's such a need for it. I mean, I think we had 162 new teachers being mentored this year, across 17 schools. It's, when you think about it by schools, we hired a lot of new positions, but at the same point, there is so much opportunity for that leadership. And,
Yeah.
I've had the success of kind of finding the right people, but when I started doing this, I would pick them. Now it's in joint efforts with the principals. It's a conversation. Who are your building leaders that you think should be doing this level of work? So for me, it's been a lot more open communication and learning from my missteps along the way.
That's the next level of leadership, as we're all creating this common language to sustain the profession, really, through mentoring and leadership. Suzanne, I know that you're working in the well-being leadership mentoring, and I'm a yoga teacher, trained yoga teacher, so I've been integrating more mindfulness practices into the mentoring programs, and the mentors love it. With Teaching with Light, that book had more strategies for resilience and looking at our strengths instead of always our weaknesses. What can you tell us? What are you celebrating with that way of looking at it?
I think I'm really inspired by taking a look at how mentoring can foster communities of well-being and resilience in schools. So, the research has told us often that, mentors grow from their mentoring experiences and they're encouraged to reflect. And so we know this. But now there's a new line of research that I've been following that suggests that because mentoring is such meaningful work, and teachers have opportunities to be in this mindset of service, have positive relationships, they are deriving as much for their own well-being as educators, as much renewal as seasoned teachers, as the new teachers are deriving from being mentored. So I'm fascinated by that reciprocity.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested in Seligman's PERMA model, and how could that structure be an avenue for inquiry into the work that mentors and educators do. And I'm just about to, I hope, we're gathering participants right now, embark on a new study that will explore how educator learning about mindfulness practices is influencing their well-being. How have the strategies that they have learned filtered into their well-being and beyond that, even in their home lives and personal relationships.
We're human beings. Teachers, even though the students might think we live at school, we're still human beings. And I guess the well-being, back to Jay, is we have to exhale. We can't just be always. So there's the mindfulness. When I learned in yoga teacher training, was all about the breath. It was the breath work, not the poses. It wasn't about standing on my head and doing contortions. It was being able to sit quietly and breathe and know that made a difference. I want to thank you both for being wonderful guests on an important topic. I want our listeners, as this winds down, to think about how your leadership influences the work you do in school as part of a mentoring program, or if you're a beginning teacher. So I thank the listeners for being with us. And I always close with an affirmation for mentors and novice teachers. But for today, I feel the conversation is one affirmation for all the listeners, which is, I am a teacher leader. So I thank you both. Thank you, Jay. Great to see you.
Thank you.
And Suzanne, it was a pleasure to meet with you. And thank you to our listeners. I hope that you'll stay tuned for episode 4, which is going to be titled Cultivate Positivity Through Mentoring Groups. All right, see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's Teacher to Teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free new teacher toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.